Hello and welcome back. This is the intro to n8n, and this isn't an automation platform. n8n is an amazing cloud and self-hosted tool used to automate your workflows. So think of it like this. If you have to do the same thing every day at your job, maybe every morning at like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., you have to do a certain set of tasks. Wouldn't it be nice to automate that, or at least automate parts of that? It can get really tedious in a job if you have other things you should be doing or want to be doing, but you have to do so and so. Well, with a tool like n8n, you might just be able to automate that. So let's go look at an example workflow that I built. So here's a workflow I built, and essentially it is trying to do the part of maybe like a resume screener slash recruiter. So essentially what's happening here is an employee will apply to a job posting, and then right here at the far left hand side where my cursor's at, this is the trigger, and we'll talk more about what triggers and actions are, but this is what causes the workflow to start. So once someone submits a resume, I have the Google form where they submit it to append a row into Google Sheets to show that there is a new application submitted. And again, this is just a test case. If you're a company, you're most likely not having people apply to a Google form, but whatever that may be that they're applying to, you could implement similar logic to get this to work. Anyways, once someone submits an application, there is a new row added to this Google Sheet. The next thing that happens is I am requesting to grab that data. So essentially, I'm just going to the location where the resume is at and trying to get that data. And then once I do this HTTP request, I am now extracting data from that resume file. So I'm reading the resume file, I'm extracting the text from the resume file. So think of the text like showing your skills like SQL, Java, C++, stuff like that, and also your work experience. And now I'm sending all this data to an AI agent. And again, you don't have to understand anything I'm showing you right now. This is just a high-level overview of what you can build. You don't have to understand a thing. I'm going to explain everything, so just keep that in mind. Don't feel too overwhelmed. But this is now passing the resume text data to an AI agent, and this AI agent will score the resume on a scale from 1 to 100 based on how well it relates to my job posting. So I set up a link to my job posting, and I said, hello. So I said, hey, ChatGPT, right down here, this is the model being used. I said, reference this job posting, and now I want you to look at the resume submitted and then rank this resume on a score from 1 to 100 based on how well it relates to that job posting. So then once it comes up with a number, it'll say, I don't know, maybe the job posting in the resume is a 90% match. It'll update the field here to say, okay, the score of the resume is 90. And then we call our next AI agent, which gives us a summary of this person's resume. So I say, hey, can you look at their resume and can you reference this job posting and say, what are some pros, what are some cons, and overall, what do you summarize this employee to be, if they're a good fit or not to this job posting? And then I save that data into a variable as well. Finally, we are then appending this data back to our Google Sheet. And now we're gonna run an if condition to say, if the user's score is above 85 or at least 85, we'll send a message to the hiring manager. We'll say, hey, there's an applicant who submitted a resume with an 85% or greater match for the job posting. Maybe you should go check them out because it could be a good fit. So that's essentially what's going on here. Someone submits a resume. We have AI grade that resume and also summarize it. And then we add a score onto the Google Sheet for that resume. So that's essentially what's happening here. And you can see this isn't a very complicated workflow. There's not a lot happening, but you can really go into detail with these workflows. You can have them do a lot. And again, if everything I said there didn't make a whole lot of sense, it's not a worry. It's completely okay. We're gonna go cover everything. All right, next up, we're gonna look at some of the components to these workflows, and the workflow being what I just showed you before, of where you have these little squares everywhere and you have these lines connecting them. Now we're going to explore what's what. So first up, we have our triggers. These triggers, they start a workflow when a specific event happens. So think of a trigger like this. Think of a scheduled trigger. So for example, every day at 6 a.m. Eastern time, we're going to send a good morning message in our Slack channel. So the trigger here would be the scheduled action. So a trigger is just whatever has to happen for the workflow to run. So a scheduled trigger is a perfect example of how to display this. Every day at 6 a.m. Eastern time, do the following actions. So the trigger here is this: every day at 6 a.m. Eastern. That is what triggers the workflow to happen. And after the trigger, what's next is our nodes. And these nodes are the building blocks or steps of a workflow. So each node will perform a specific action. So think of an action like maybe sending an email, updating a spreadsheet, or even based on the workflow I just showed you, calling an AI agent. So example, maybe every day at 6 a.m. Eastern time, we will send an email to so-and-so with the revenue report. And then we'll feed in dynamic data to the revenue report based on whatever week or month it is. I don't know. That's just an example of what an action could be, sending an email. Next up, we have our AI agents. Now, agents are embedded into our workflows. These are large language models. Think of OpenAI, Claude, etc., Gemini, for example. And these enable intelligent behavior such as decision-making, summarizing data, searching, generating responses, and more. And here are a few main components of the agents in n8n. So first up, we have our prompt node. So it defines how the large language model should behave. So for example, in my workflow on the previous screen, where I'm sending the resume data to my large language model, I'm saying, can you please look at this resume, then reference the job application and grade it on a scale from 1 to 100. And I say, remember, you should be looking at the skills, you look at the work experience, and so on. So essentially, I'm prompting the large language model how to give me data back. And at the end, I'm saying only return a single value, just a numerical value on a scale from 1 to 100. So it's never going to return me anything greater than that. And most likely you have experience with this because if you've used ChatGPT or Gemini or anything like that, you've prompted these before. Now, when I say you've prompted them, all it means is that you're sending a message to ChatGPT. So if you send a message saying hello to ChatGPT, you're just prompting it to reply to that message. That's all that's happening here. It's nothing crazy. So next up, we have this memory component. So if you want to store the conversation or the data context of the prompts with the large language model, you could do so. Finally, we have tools, and these tools allow the agent to take certain actions, such as calling a weather API, maybe searching a file up, and there's a ton of options you could implement with these agents. This is going to be the last wall of text PowerPoint slide we have here before I'll show you some more screenshots of the platform, but I want to go over some more n8n benefits to help drill through the purpose of this platform and what you can build with it. So the main thing is you can automate repetitive tasks. So think of this scenario. If you're a social media manager who spends time maybe once a week gathering engagement stats from all these social media platforms, and then you need to summarize this data, email your team this data, well, you could save a lot of time by having a workflow do all of this for you. So think of the following workflow. You have a trigger. It could be a scheduled trigger like we talked about earlier, where this workflow will run every morning at 9 a.m. We'll say 9 a.m. Eastern time. So then you have your steps. And now when I say first step, that means the first action that happens after the trigger. So it's the first step in the workflow, but the second node, if that makes sense. So first up, at 9 a.m. Eastern time, we're going to make an HTTP request, which think of these as, in our case, is just getting or posting data. So in this instance, we are just getting data. We're making a request to get data from these platforms. So we're making a request to get data from Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. And this could be engagement data such as likes and so on. Next up, we're finding some kind of function node to format this data. So think of formatting the total likes, the shares, the comments, the impressions, and we need to format this per platform. Next up, we could have one or more AI agents to summarize the data. So we could have an AI agent look at all this data we've just sent and say, can you summarize maybe our Instagram posts impressions versus our Twitter or X account impressions. And then finally, in this step, we have our email node. So this would send data out in an email to our team members. So it could be something like, good morning, social media team. Here's a summary of our impressions last week across all of our social media platforms. And then it could be like a list, like Instagram saw a 23% greater impression rate compared to last week. Or we could say, here's a comparison. Instagram has 48% more engagement and impressions than all of our other social media combined or something like that. And so on. You could format this data however you want, and you could email your team members about what you would normally do but now it's automated. So think of tasks that you do every day at work, or maybe for whatever other projects you have going on. And then you can think of n8n as a tool to automate these. Additional benefits, you can integrate these workflows across APIs, applications, and more. You can also self-host this. So if you don't want to use the n8n cloud website, the link right there, you could self-host this with Docker. And I also have a video on this, so skip to that if you want to self-host. Otherwise, throughout the entire section, we're going to be displaying how to use n8n Cloud. And n8n is also very scalable, especially for developers, but it's also accessible for non-developers. So if you don't have any background in coding or development, don't worry, I'm going to show you everything from the ground up, and we don't even have to code anything. I didn't write a single line of code. All I had to do was just drag and drop. So it's really easy. All right, so now here's an example of what a trigger could be. So when you first open up the workflow development area, you're going to click on this plus icon here that says add a first step, and then you can specify a trigger here. So looking at this menu here, we can see there's a manual trigger, maybe an app event. So something happens that's maybe Slack, for example, on the right-hand side, maybe something happens on Slack where this trigger would start. We have a schedule trigger, a webhook call, a form submission, and so on. But for example, let's say that I just typed Slack, this would pop up. And then these are the triggers that Slack has as an option. So for example, if I clicked on a new user, so whenever a new user joins our Slack channel, then something would happen. Or I could say whenever a new message is posted to a specific channel, let's go automate something. Let's go do something. So the trigger is just what has to happen for this workflow to run. Next up, once you click one of these triggers, you will need to enter credentials to connect to your Slack channel with. So think of it like this. If you want to trigger when a new user joins your Slack, well, you're gonna have to log in with some type of credentials to link your Slack account to this workflow. After you do that, you now have the option to click this plus icon to add an action node. So for example, let's say that when someone joins our Slack channel or whatever, we could have an action that says send a message. So maybe a new user joins, and then we want to send a welcome message to the new user. So when you click this action node, it's a similar thing. It's just, you just have to link your Slack account, and then you specify where to send the message to, and then what the actual message text will be. So a lot of n8n is just, you select the trigger or the action, enter your details, and then customize it. And that's pretty much the flow for all of these. Then finally, once we have these two nodes here, we have a trigger and an action, we could technically make this active if we wanted to. Now these are just highlighted red because I never entered my credentials. It was just to display how we could build something like this. But then once you want this to run on its own, you just have to click this slider here. And then anytime a user joins, we would send them a welcome message. And that's how simple n8n is. It's really straightforward. And as mentioned, we'll also be exploring how to self-host n8n with Docker. So that is fully operational and it's fully supported by n8n. There's a ton of documentation on their website for this. Finally, we're also going to be working with OpenAI, and we're going to be utilizing the API. So if I go back to the second slide showing our workflow, you can see here that I'm calling OpenAI chat model. So I'm sending this resume data over, and now I'm sending a message to ChatGPT. Well, unfortunately, that isn't a free option, but it is insanely cheap. So looking at my usage here, you can see that I've done 18 total requests here. The tokens used was 11,000, and this cost me less than a penny. So it's very cheap. Money is not going to be an issue here to utilize the API with OpenAI. Because think about it, if you're running this for a company, it has to be very cheap because who knows how many times this workflow is going to be running. So again, it is very cheap to run these operations. And even here, I was using one of the more expensive ChatGPT models. So it'd be even less money if I used maybe a lower end model. So again, don't worry about cost here. It's not going to cost a whole lot of anything. You could put, I don't know, like $1 on here and be completely set for the course. I mean, I only did 18 requests and that included testing. So again, welcome to n8n. That is an intro to what n8n is. Next up, we're going to do a tour of the platform, and then we're going to actually build a workflow. So our first workflow we're going to build that has some use is we're going to pull financial data from like a site like Yahoo Finance, and we're going to send this new financial data over to Discord. So that'll be our first workflow we'll build, or at least our first useful workflow, but there's a ton of options on what you can build. So I'll see you there.